I'm Iris Wilbur-Glick, president of Louisville Forum, and welcome to our December program. We typically meet on the second Wednesday of each month at Vincenzo's Restaurant in downtown Louisville, and all are welcome. Founded in 1984, the Louisville Forum is a nonpartisan public issues group that hosts debates and discussions of contemporary and sometimes controversial public policy issues that affect the greater Louisville community. For more information on the Louisville Forum, our programs, or to make reservations, please visit louisvilleforum.org. Today's program, a preview to the 2024 legislative session. January 2nd kicks off the 60-day budget session in Frankfort. Legislative members representing 138 seats will convene and begin working on a variety of legislative proposals. Some we have heard as leftover priorities from 2023 session. Some were discussed during the interim session. Perennial issues like education, workforce, justice, and public safety, healthcare are expected to see some action. And oh, by the way, it so happens to be an election year. But what is expected to dominate the discussion is related to what is funded, what is not, and what is going to happen with efforts to further reduce the state personal income tax rate. I'm excited to bring you an excellent panel of Louisville legislators to help preview the session and dive into these issues. Minority Floor Leader Gerald Neal has served in the state Senate since 1989. He represents part of Jefferson County and a practicing attorney. Senator Neal is a member of the Appropriations and Revenue Budget Review Subcommittee on Education, Banking and Insurance, Education, Judiciary Committees, in addition to Committee on Committees and Rules. Please join me in welcoming Senator Neal. To our end over here, Representative Ken Fleming represents parts of Jefferson and Oldham counties, first elected in 2016 and then again in 2020. Representative Fleming has also served on Louisville Metro Council from 2002 to 2014. He's a member of Appropriations and Revenue, chair of the Budget Review Sub on General Government, Finance, Personnel, and Public Retirement, BR Sub on Health and Family Services, Transportation, and the Family and Children Committees. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Representative Nima Kulkarni has served in the legislature since 2019 and represents a part of Jefferson County. She's an attorney and specializes in immigration and employment law. Representative Kulkarni is a member of the Judiciary, Licensing, Occupations, Administrative Regulations, Tourism, Small Business, and IT, Economic Development and Workforce Investment, and BR Sub on Justice and Judiciary Committees. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Representative Jared Bauman just completed his first session this year. He represents part of Jefferson County and a member of Natural Resources and Energy, Economic Development and Workforce Investment, and Education Committees. Thank you for being here today. Okay, as you notice, we whizzed right through introductions just so we can get to the meat of the program. Again, friendly reminder, there are question slips at your table. Please fill those out, raise your hand. A board member will come by and collect those. So let's jump in. So we'll start off with you, Representative Ken Fleming. Name one priority you have this session and give a quick overview of your plan.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate the opportunity to come to speak with y'all. This has always been a great format to exchange ideas and understand what's going on in the General Assembly and so forth. So I do appreciate the opportunity to do that. I think the first and foremost priority and high priority is the budget. That's our duty. That's our duty to go through and making sure that we have a good, strong budget that will address a lot of the needs in Kentucky as well as here in Louisville. And so that's our first priority. And we're going through in a very laborious process over the past quite a few months in order to look at each component of the Commonwealth, from safety to education to healthcare, as well as tax reform. And that's one of the things I'll be pushing hard on in terms of tax reform and making sure we're still driving that income tax hopefully down to zero. We had a little situation in terms of not meeting our triggers, but that shows proof in the pudding of what our thoughts from a systematic process to make sure that we have a strong, sound budget. When you have over 16, 17% in a budget reserve account, that's pretty strong. That's one of the tops in the nation. when you're going from 6 to 4% to put more money in your pocket, that's progress. So you can take that money and invest it, save it, or spend it. So that's our top priority when it comes to the budget, and that's what we'll be focusing on.
Thank you. Representative Kulkarni, we'll skip around a little bit. Name a top priority of yours and a plan to execute.
So one of the main things that we've heard in the legislature over the past several years post-pandemic is workforce shortages, workforce issues. And I think this is a space where we can work in a bipartisan manner because everybody in every single county in our Commonwealth is dealing with the same issues. So I have a resolution, it's not a bill. It's a resolution that establishes a task force, and I'm sure many of you have heard that, task forces are where good ideas go to die. I'm going to try to buck that trend. But the task force is essentially designed to have public hearings with all of the required stakeholders. So we will figure out what are the barriers for individuals that have not been tapped historically or who need a little bit more support from employers, which includes refugees and immigrants and English as a second language learners. It includes veterans. It includes individuals with disabilities. It includes youth. It includes individuals in rural areas and areas with high poverty rates. So the idea there is that we will identify barriers that not only have to do with economic issues like wages, but possibly issues that deal with previously being incarcerated, issues dealing with transportation and housing. So there's a lot of ways that we can look at this holistically to make sure that we reduce or eliminate barriers for people to get back to work in a sustainable manner all throughout our Commonwealth.
Representative Bauman, you're up.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I'd like to start by wishing you all a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Iris, thank you for the opportunity to be on this distinguished panel. It really is a pleasure to be up here with these fine folks. And so I'm looking forward to my second session next year, and top priority for me is public safety, security, and protection. So I'm leading a team of legislators that will be putting forth the Safer Kentucky Act. You may know it a little bit. It's been in the news lately. And so that's the top priority for me. It is really paramount to achieving my vision of unstoppable prosperity in the city of Louisville and making Kentucky the greatest state in our nation. Because in order to do that, we need to accomplish what Ken and what Nima mentioned, right? We need a strong economy, we need strong families, we need strong education, and we need strong quality of life. And there's principles, concepts, and practices that live within each of those, but foundational to all of it is public safety, protection, and security. And our foundation in Kentucky, in Louisville, is broke right now, and we must repair it. We need to hold criminals accountable for their action, and that is what we're going to do with the Safer Kentucky Act. That's my top priority.
Senator Neal, thoughts on your top priority for the 2024 legislative session?
Well, thank you for that. First of all, can you hear me well? Okay, let me say it. It's really difficult to answer a question like that because it depends on what is happening at the particular time, who's affected by the policies we adopt. So I could pull one out of the hat, but I don't think I could do it justice here. However, I do agree with Representative Fleming. It's the budget. The budget is the most important policy document that we undertake. It's going to determine greatly what's going to get funded, to what extent, and whether or not it's going to come to fruition. Almost everything we talk about is affected by budgetary issues. And if you don't address that going forward, then just spend a year or two in the General Assembly and you'll understand it. I do want to point out, though, that we are at a point where we have unprecedented opportunity. And some people would say, well, what we need to do is pocket that money and, do our thing. But if you really look at the money and what we have and the opportunities that present themselves, and if you look at those things that we've neglected or didn't address because of budgetary considerations, the fact of the matter is we have opportunity to address these things now to some degree. And I think we have to be tactical and strategic, and we have to be very focused on what we can do and what should be done that's fundamental to our going forward. But I think we should seize that opportunity and be very careful about arbitrarily saying we got a pot of money, let's keep it in the pot because something may happen in the future, when we realize that what we have to do is address issues on an ongoing basis going forward. So I'd say the budget is the most important consideration.
Thank you, Senator Neal. And before we move on, again, friendly reminder to submit your questions. Let's just stay on budget for a moment. And Senator Neal, I'm going to start with you, actually. So our November program, we had a couple of journalists join us, and we talked about sort of the implications, sort of the analyses of the impact of the 2023 gubernatorial race moving forward. How, the reelection of Governor Andy Beshear would impact the General Assembly and some political activities and so forth. So what are your thoughts about this General Assembly working with this reelected governor? Are there opportunities for alignment? What are some shared priorities that we may be able to expect? Or do you think we'll see more of the same, where he'll do his budget proposal, House will do their budget proposal, Senate will respond? Thoughts?
Well, thank you for that question. Let me just let me say to all of you that I've been in the legislature a long time. And some people, I think, would ask me to leave. But the fact of the matter is I've observed a lot of things over a long period of time. And what amazes me is how much time we waste eliminating or compromising our ability to work together, to find common ground, to demonstrate respect for the institutions that we have, be they executive, legislative, or judicial. Being measured in our approach toward each other and thinking beyond our individual egos and perspectives as if we knew it all. One thing I have learned is we do not know it all. And it's hard to determine how to go forward with respect to that. So you asked me a very fundamental question. I don't want to give the answer that's really deep in my brain because I'm an optimist. I'm a perennial optimist. I look forward to good things. I expect good things. But every once in a while, reality creeps in. We have a House of Representatives, which I truly respect. Many of my friends, in fact, I think all my friends here are members of the House of Representatives, and I do mean friends. I think we all will say that about each other. But we have a House of Representatives that jumps ahead of the normal process as it relates to our governor. That's an indicator. So usually it starts with the governor presenting, and then the House comes in, et cetera. The House really is showing, in my position, disregard or disrespect in that regard. I'm sure they have a tactical reason for that. I'm not fully understanding that. Because the reality is the House, the budgets start in the House. But that's not the procedure historically we've undertaken. That's an indicator, perhaps. But I'm hopeful that my colleagues in the House and my colleagues in the Senate will move in a measured way, in a respectful way, so that we can get to common ground together where we know it's important to all of us. I know that's a lot of words, folks. But the fact of the matter is that I don't think we demonstrate enough respect in the process for us to not waste time on things that are important to you and to me.
So Representative Fleming, as a member of A&R, Appropriations and Revenue, sort of thoughts, a response to Senator Neal's comments about some traditions that the House has bucked in recent years regarding the release, the sequence of releasing their budget, the House's budget proposal compared to the governor's. Thoughts?
First of all, Chairman Petrie has done a phenomenal job. He is up there constantly. Every time I get up there, he's already up there. And he has put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in coming up and listening to and talking with various groups and individuals to make sure that he takes a total holistic approach to get as much information as possible. So, and I know he and leadership have reached out across the government or the branches. And to be honest with you, there has been a whole lot of response in the past. Hearing a little tidbits from the inaugural speech yesterday, there seemed to be more of a push to try to find that. And I am hopeful, like Gerald Neal is, or Senator Neal, in terms of trying to find.
Gerald's okay.
Sorry?
Gerald's okay.
Okay. That we find, try to find some common ground, and I'm hopeful. I know leadership on both chambers will be meeting with the governor soon, and hopefully that will be flushed out and so forth. But, and I'll also be frank as well that when you look at the past 4 years, and even prior to that, it's the General Assembly that pushes the envelope. You look at all the things, the policies and procedures and things that we've come up with over the past years. It's the General Assembly. It's Gerald and I reaching across the aisle and working on the West End Opportunity Partnership. It's Gerald Neal and myself on other programs that we have worked with. And even with Representative Wilner and I have worked on mental health issues. That's the kind of stuff that a lot of the public don't see, but you get a lot of flame from the media, and I understand the media, they drive their money from conflict, and I get it. That's capitalism. But when a rubber hits the road, it's those types of relationships and partnerships that we work together to move the envelope from a General Assembly and move Kentucky forward. That's what y'all put us in the office for, and that's what we're basically doing. The governor has his agenda. He wants to do that. That's fine. We'll listen to it. But the General Assembly will have its process, and I don't think we'll be changing much of our process in order to move the needle to get y'all in a better position in terms of having a higher quality of life.
So actually, let's stay on bipartisanship. I feel like, I'm probably not a typical observer, but one thing I do want to point out in case you don't know is majority of the bills that pass the General Assembly that receive a signature by the governor pass on bipartisan lines. It's not widely reported, but we have year after year statistics of the bulk of the bills are passed by overwhelmingly bipartisan margins. And so Representative Kulkarni and Representative Bauman, as newer members, sort of what has your experience been like? And we can start off with you, Representative Kulkarni, about like what it's truly like when you experience bipartisanship and when there have been instances of strong common ground, and how you can maybe carry that forward and maybe speak to some bipartisan measures we can expect come next year.
Yeah, I mean, and I think even going back to the budget, there's campaigns, and then there's the media, and there's speeches, and then there's the budget document, which is really a moral document. You put your money where your mouth is, so no matter what promises you've made, if it's not in the budget, we're not funding it. And I think to that point, I have had a lot of success. I mean, I think we can call each other friends here. I've had a lot of success talking to individuals on either side of the aisle about issues that matter to constituents. I've worked really hard to push a Louisville-specific agenda, at least on our side, and we will get to that at some point, hopefully, during session. But I think a lot of times the conversations get lost, right? The budget covers all of Kentucky. We need to remember that Louisville is the economic driver, and we do have a surplus, but a lot of that comes from federal funds, a one-time federal payout. And I think what we need to remember is that we still have needs here in Louisville that are unmet in terms of housing, in terms of health care, in terms of access to education, clean water, healthy food. The list goes on. And so as long as we are having a budget document and a budget process, I'm less concerned about how it gets there, as insofar as it gets there. We have an item for the things that are concerning our constituents and Louisville specifically, because there are a lot of issues like gun violence, like public safety, that we are not necessarily addressing in any real and substantial way. So I expect bipartisanship. I think that's the way government is supposed to function. I don't think we're all elected to go up there and have our own individual viewpoints and not work with each other, especially on issues that concern maybe many of our districts, and certainly if it's a citywide issue. So I think it's something that is crucial. We're not going to get to a budget that everyone agrees on. We're not going to get to a lot of legislation that everyone might agree on that would be important and very good legislation if we cannot come to the table and have civil discussions about, even if it is some controversial issue.
Thank you. So Representative Bauman, maybe there's a good tie in here, something that's Louisville specific, something that you're helping to lead, the Safer Kentucky Act regarding public safety. Are there bipartisan opportunities within your proposal? I know we haven't seen sort of the whole rollout, but some provisions have been publicly discussed. What can you share about maybe a way forward and how we can bring folks along?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we certainly have had bipartisan discussions throughout the entire process over the summer and the fall. There are many provisions within the bill that have bipartisan support. There are a couple that don't, but we've worked very closely with the Democrat mayor's office in helping with the policy, and so I certainly think that we will pass it in a bipartisan way. The bill that we put forth on Friday in committee will be testifying in the interim joint committee on judiciary. Will likely get tweaked a little bit again heading into session based on feedback that we get from Republicans and Democrats. So we have offered everyone a seat at the table as we've crafted this policy. We have listened, learned, and adapted, adjusted our approach based on what we've learned from Democrats and Republicans alike. So it's been a pleasure going through the process as a freshman on this policy. And then back to the first session and the original question. I mean, when I came to Frankfurt as an outsider stepping into the arena, I did not know what to expect really. And I can tell you, I was very pleased to learn very early on that we have 138 amazing people in Frankfurt working to move our state forward. Democrats and Republicans alike working together. Again, as they stated, some of the stuff you see on the news isn't reality in the annex and in the Capitol. We love one another. We treat one another with respect. Actually, Ken and Nima sit on either side of me on the floor as well, and I learned a lot from both of them over that 30-day session. Nima went out of her way to help me with different things that she didn't have to because she's a great person, and we have 138 people like that in Frankfurt, and it's an absolute pleasure to be there.
Great, thank you. Let's go ahead and shift to some audience questions. So we have a board member stepping up to the mic now, Lawrence Smith. Let's go ahead and read a couple, and we'll help facilitate from up here.
First of all, a request from the audience for everybody, if you would get as close as you can to your mic and then speak up like you're giving a floor speech, that would be helpful. Thank you. First question is this, and this is for anyone who wants to answer it. When you lowered the income tax, you raised a variety of sales taxes. And I would add to that, broaden the category of things that are taxed by sales tax. Will that happen again?
Senator Neal?
Thank you for that. You know, one of the things that I have the luxury of experiencing is not setting the agenda. And in the minority, we do not set the agenda. We do participate on a bipartisan basis, and I like that word bipartisan, and I do agree that we pretty much agree on most things together. If you look at the budget, maybe 90% of the things in terms of issues we do. But the reality is that whoever sets the agenda is going to ultimately determine the outcome, or at least they have a better chance of determining the outcome. So the question as to how we do this is very important. So I don't think, let me put it this way, I don't think if we minimize the question of relationships, and I hope I'm not going off track here, because I heard something down here. I think this is not a kumbaya kind of situation. I want to make that clear to everybody here. The fact of the matter is that things that are done is a matter of business and a matter of interest, and this is where the rubber meets the road. This is what's happening when we do business there. So it's nice for us to smile and be nice to each other. Now, you know, I know I'm putting sort of a cloud on the discussion, but I have to get this out. This is real work. You don't have to hate somebody to do the right thing, and you don't have to love somebody to do the right thing. You do the right thing because you make that judgment. But I have to tell you, there are power relationships in the legislature, and they're manifest every day. They determine how you function, what you get, how you interact with other individuals, and ultimately the outcome. So I'm not sure I went straight to your question there, but I was really hung on the comment and the tone that's set here. I don't want to set a negative tone, but I do want people to understand this is serious business. This is not a kumbaya. This is something where we're doing business. We're doing the business of the people. So when we set a budget up, or when we say we're going to drive our money down to zero in terms of income, it has consequences. It has major consequences. Kansas put that on their table, and it had consequences. They had to back all the way up, had to come again. Kentucky saw that. a different kind of model, but what did it have to do? We better put a trigger in there, because who knows, it might slide off this cliff. We don't know where they may end. So, you know, I like to smile at these issues. There's nothing angry about me with them, but I'm very serious about it. The question is that when you set a context like that, it affects everything else you do in terms of your decision-making if you're setting the agenda. So you can't say this is one little separate thing we're doing over here. Or when you start dealing with how the school system is going to get cut up or not, or divided, it has tremendous consequences. It does tie back into the budget. But the question is, who gets affected? Are we going to make sure that we guide it by principles of equity and fairness? Are we going to look at the outcome where we have win-wins in terms of our community? That's what's important to me. So when we talk about this money and we talk about driving things down to zero, and when we talk about we're receiving unprecedented amounts of money and we're not determining how we're going to deal with issues that have been ignored over a period of time, then it does give me a level of concern. And I think people should be concerned because we're in this together. It's about people. It's about business. It's about outcomes. It's about being fair to all of us that we live together in the society. I'm going to stop right there because I could continue this for a while because it's a burning piece in the middle of my body. And I got to tell you, I know my colleagues feel the same way in terms of how they see things. And I welcome the opportunity for us to continue this discussion. I'm going to stop.
This is a major issue going into 2024. Representative Fleming, as a member of A&R, thoughts, response?
Yep. Back in 2017, 2018, a couple of us got together and started looking at what we can do with the tax structure. And we knew something had to change because Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio, they're all eating our lunch. Businesses aren't coming here. People aren't. They're not having more disposable income in their pocket. What can we do? So I did some research, and I found that several states had some modification of triggers in there. And so I went to, and I talked to a couple of my colleagues, and we came up with this formula, and it's been modified between the chairman of the House and the Senate in terms of what was originally proposed. And part of that was to drive income down to zero. Why we want to do that? Mainly because that to attract businesses or to get more employees into the workforce, it's your money in your pocket. So we need to drive the income down on the individual level. We went from business from 6 to 5, and I don't see that really changing much. But other part of the component of that individual income tax being reduced is controlled spending. And I can tell you for one thing, we have done a pretty good job in terms of trying to rail in controlled spending. Now you can take that however you want to take it in terms of defining it, but the A&R committee has gone through a very systematic, methodological approach in order to look at controlled spending. We are finding money that's being shifted and moved and so forth in various departments, and we're trying to reel that in. Because what we want to try to do is make sure we hit those triggers in order to continue to drive the income down to zero. Will we get there? I don't know. We were just short of going from 4 to 3.5 this coming year because we had a couple events. We had the West Kentucky tornadoes, we had the East Kentucky floods, and we had some, we call it unnecessary or the necessary government expenditures. That was around $434 million. If those things didn't happen, which is unfortunate events, some things you can't control, we'd have gone to 3.5. But in that process, we looked at control spending. Let me give you a third element, and I put forth this several times, and that is tax expenditures. We have $9.5 billion that we basically have in terms of tax incentives and tax credits and so forth. Now that's down over the past couple of years. But we need to continue to look at that. And I have put forth several proposals the past 2 years to try to look at that particular component in order to help reduce those items that aren't being used a lot but are taking up unnecessary space, that we can reallocate money into those more needed services, such as what Senator Neal said. But the thing is that having those items in there, those three components, will help drive that income down. In terms of expand the sales, that's what we did some time ago. I can't say what we're going to do this coming budget cycle, but those are three items that we've been focusing on. At least I've been focusing on in terms of trying to shift that money over to put in your pockets so we can be in a good, strong financial position.
Thank you both. We'll move to the next question, Ron.
There were quite a few audience questions on public safety and justice. Kentucky's incarceration rate per capita is one of the worst in the country. Quite a few folks were wondering why safety plans would be focused on more penalties, which would result in more incarceration, and why there has not been more focus on funding for mental health, drug treatment, and prisons. And another question, whether or not the state would consider allowing Louisville to statutorily raise more revenue to address its concerns with its courts and lack of police.
So,
Go ahead. Yep.
sorry. Yeah, thank you. I'll just say this. The Safer Kentucky Act is not focused on incarcerating people. The Safer Kentucky Act is focused on the 4.5 million people that choose to live in our state, that want to work and raise a family, let's say here in Louisville, that want to live where there's a thriving economy, where there's a good education system, where there's a high quality of life. And it's focused on those 4.5 million people. It is not focused on incarcerating people. Yes, there is accountability in the Safer Kentucky Act, but we're talking about violent criminals, right? People that are really destroying our city. We have a number of gangs operating in our city that we need to go after, that we need to target. And so really that's where it's focused. It's not focused on incarceration. And for the mental health aspects, we certainly support that. There are some mental health components to the Safer Kentucky Act, and that's a separate bill, some of those mental health components that you mentioned. And so we are in favor of that. We're willing to entertain those policies and look at that for what they are. But really, when I look back at this forum, actually, over the last decade, at least twice a year for the last 10 years, this forum has discussed for an hour an element that is covered and supported by the Safer Kentucky Act. So we need this policy. This forum has made that clear over the last decade, that we have a significant number of issues as it relates to public safety and protection in our city. And so the Safer Kentucky Act will address those. And so there's a number of provisions in there that will account for violent crime. For example, attempted murder. Just by a show of hands, who here would think attempted murder is a violent offense? Everybody? Yeah. So today, it's not in Kentucky state statute. So we are going to add attempted murder as a violent offense in the Safer Kentucky Act. We're going to address a number of different things as well, carjackings and making that a state statute. We're going to look at street camping and provisions around improving public safety and protecting business owners' rights by eliminating the street campers in those areas, public areas. So there's a number of provisions in there that are focused on criminal behavior that is now going unchecked. And you know, this didn't just happen by accident. I think we're all aware of that, you know, that there's some liberal social justice philosophies that promote, you know, harsh treatment of law enforcement and leniency towards criminals. But the pendulum has swung too far, and we have to reset. And that's what we're doing here.
Representative Kulkarni, would you like to respond?
I have to jump in a little bit. So, you know, what I have seen in my time in the legislature is that we continue to add felonies. We add classes. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now? A little better. Up. How's this?
Shout.
I'll just yell.
Shout.
In my time in the legislature, I have noticed a trend towards adding crimes, adding classes of felonies, adding more and more categories that we can put people away for. And what I've seen on the other side of it is nationally, right? The movement has been towards how do we figure out the root causes of incarceration? We're the most carceral nation on the planet. We put more people away. We have more women that are incarcerated than most any other country. in this world. And a lot of those women are there before they've even had trial. So the reasons we put people away, and of course, this all disproportionately impacts Black and brown communities, but are we putting people away for low-level drug offenses? Are we putting them away for nonviolent property offenses? I understand the push towards public safety. I think everyone here can agree. We want our city to be safe. We want our communities to be safe. I think you're not going to find disagreement there. But are we going to get there by putting more and more people in jail? Because that is costing us hundreds of billions of dollars as a nation. And Kentucky is right up there. We probably have some of the highest costs because we lock the most people away. So what we have to look at is what are we doing in terms of addressing the root causes of why people are committing these crimes? What crimes are they committing? Are they getting due process? Are they able to pay bail? There's a lot of different aspects and nuances that we are not discussing in this sort of knee-jerk reaction to we just need to get people off the street. And I'm just going to say for the record that homeless people aren't criminals. You can't treat them all. You can't just treat them all like criminals and say things like we're going to clear them or we're going to eliminate them. The issue is housing. The issue is being able to address underlying mental health issues and substance use disorders and any trauma that is occurring. There are a lot of reasons people are on the street. Some of them choose to be on the street. Some of them are there temporarily. But we have to be able to differentiate between what offenses we are creating categories for and making sure that we are focusing on violent offenders, that we are focusing our law enforcement resources on the people and the crimes that will keep our streets safe and not simply unlocking more people up so that we can feel better about ourselves and have talking points. And I'm not saying that's why you're doing it. I'm saying we're all on the same page with public safety. And this is where we will have these discussions. But again, the budget is our moral document. If we aren't putting in money for mental health care, if we aren't putting in money for housing, if we aren't putting in money to figure out why people are committing these crimes and why they are on the streets, then we're not going to address the root cause of the problems, and they're just going to keep continuing and growing.
I'll just respond quickly that the Safer Kentucky Act in no way criminalizes homelessness, okay? Being homeless is not a crime today, and it will not be under the Safer Kentucky Act, okay? Street camping, or it just, homelessness will still be allowed. It just prevents certain areas where they can camp, right? So they wouldn't be able to camp out in front of Vincenzo's here on the street as they could today. So things of that nature. And to the lower level crimes, we are not going after drug addicts or people running stoplights with the Safer Kentucky Act. Okay, we are going after majority violent crimes. So just wanted to make that clear.
Lawrence, please, next question.
I have 3 questions about abortion. Specifically, will there be any attempt to add rape and incest exceptions to the current abortion law?
So
I'll jump in. The Republican caucus had our retreat about 2 weeks ago, roughly, and that was a topic that we talked about. And there's a lot of very, very honest, straightforward conversations that we had. I know there are some things that are in the works. To what degree, don't know. But there has been a lot of discussions in terms of trying to address that issue. I think we came, it's pretty clear, not only in other parts of the United States, but also here in Kentucky, that there was definitely a message that was sent. And so I think, at least on our side, on the Republican side, we were taking that very seriously and having some good conversations about that.
So on the flip side, from the Democratic caucuses, any proposals forthcoming to address rape and incest regarding Kentucky's abortion law?
You looking at me?
Either representing the Democratic caucuses.
Let me just make this simple for you. I don't believe that the government, the state, should use its power and force and rules to control the decision-making that should take place between a woman and her doctor and her God. Understand that that comes after very deep consideration. I'm sure the people that have an opposite position have thought about it deeply as well. But at the end of the day, I don't think Gerald Neal should be using his ability to make judgment on someone else and control their decision-making from the position of the state. I think it's inappropriate. So I think that probably answers all the questions you were going to ask me along those lines, correct?
That'll do. Yep. Representative Kulkarni, response?
I will reiterate everything the senator said and just add that this is going back to what I mentioned about expecting bipartisanship and not being up there to push a subjective viewpoint. I can believe whatever I want personally, very deeply, very strongly. I have a strong opinion. It's fundamental to the core of my beliefs. That does not mean that I have the right to legislate for thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, based on my personal opinion. And I think that's what we see. We're seeing this in states across the country, and we are seeing an equal and larger pushback. Amendment 2 failed by a wide margin. Any attempts to restrict reproductive rights for women or any attempts to restrict their ability to make decisions about their own bodies has been met with disapproval. And polling shows that, and frankly, votes show that. So I think that's something that we need to consider. Rape and incest are too narrow. There is no reason for our government to be able to tell a woman or a person that can become pregnant what on earth they should do with their bodies. And I think that is something that we need to consider early on. This is one of those points that we will not probably agree on. But reasonable people can disagree. I mean, this is one of those things where voters and the public really took charge of this issue and told our legislature and our government what they wanted to see.
Thank you. And Ron, let's go ahead and move on to another question. And just to kind of put Lawrence on deck here, we may do a lightning round in order to get to some more questions. So Ron, go ahead.
Approval ratings of JCPS performance has to be at record lows by the taxpayers. What, if anything, can the state do to boost JCPS student performance?
Representative Fleming, if I may start with you to get your thoughts on some potential legislative solutions to support JCPS.
I think we all recognize GPS has had its fair share of difficulties, from transportation to the gaps to a whole host of issues. And we need to be conscious of JCPS and what we're doing. 1/6 of the kids that graduate come from JCPS in the Commonwealth. And so what do we come up with? We need to look at a holistic point of view in terms of addressing that. Curriculum has been addressed in the past, as will continue to be addressed. But I wanted to just focus a little bit on the governance side of JCPS, because I believe there's initiatives to look at a workforce when it comes to teachers. I've pushed for the healthcare workforce in House Bill 200. I'm going to have another bill coming out with the aviation workforce, which we got $20 billion of economic output for that, as well as like 600 companies that feed into that. So we need to look at and help out in terms of coming up with good legislation to help out with the workforce when it comes to teachers. I've been on record on several occasions that we need to look at and increasing the teachers' pay. Because I went to Bonet School the other day, yesterday, in fact, and if you're familiar with that, it's an eye-opening experience. I know I knew about it, a little bit about it, but these kids come from a very tough situation. They're mentally and physically challenged, and they sort of slip through the cracks and not focus on. And I know the principal there and the teacher that I've talked to are doing a phenomenal job. In fact, it takes 2 or 3 people for one kid to go through a process for physical approach as well as mental. That's the kind of things that we need to be conscious of in doing that. So when I say governance, I'm talking about basically looking at how the whole system operates from my policy standpoint, because to be frank, there's a difference between what I'm hearing in my district as well as folks in other districts. There's a difference when it comes to parents' priorities and policies, with the schools, JCPS policies. There's a difference there. And so we need to figure out what policies work and so forth. There's also, we also need to be conscious of looking at how things trickle down into the system. But teachers, this is not a teacher issue. You know, this is not a principal's issue. This is basically trying to look at things in a holistic point of view, and it needs to be matched up. So as you might know, or you may or may not know, there is an initiative from the Office of Education Accountability that's going to look at the governance of systems, as well as some type of intervention into the school system, and see what works and what did not work from a countrywide perspective. There's also an audit that's going to be conducted on the JCPS. They're going to be looked at in terms of peeling those things back. And so that's a two-part of a three-legged stool that I'm looking at. And that third leg is, I think we need to look at some type of a group, work group, task force, I don't care what it might be called, but have stakeholders from this community to come together and put forth, have an understanding to flush these things out so they can take that information that they themselves come up with and also combine it with going on for the OEA as well as the audit to look at maybe some legislation to change the dynamics of JCPS. Now, I've heard all kinds of things. I've heard, well, let's expand the board. You know, let's have 7 and then 4 at large. And then we had, well, let's also look at maybe doing away with elections and just having a mayor as well as a governor appointee, that hit criteria. Then we have let's break it up. I think all those are ideas we got to look at, but I'm not here to take a knee-jerk flash pan approach to this. We need to go through a very systematic approach and have stakeholders involved. Yes, we need to have something immediately done. I get it. But in order to do something right at this magnitude, affects 100,000 kids and thousands of teachers, and the transportation that we're dealing with. In fact, I was on a call today in the past 2 weeks about several schools, so they have backup in going to a school because people can't get around BMS. Where's the? I mean, there's some suggestions, but none of them work. We got to think outside the box. And so whatever those issues are, it needs to be flushed through the system in terms of having some type of a group to look at this over this next 2024 in order to look at some legislation back in maybe in 2025. So that's what I'm trying to. I want to try to go through a systematic approach that have stakeholders involved, so we can go through and come with a best solution possible.
Senator Neal, I saw you nodding your head. Any sort of quick reactions, quick responses, then we'll move on to maybe one or two more topics.
I find Ken to be a very thoughtful individual. That's one of the reasons why I enjoy working with him.
Thanks.
He does think through things. I think any system should always be looked at periodically, whether it's something that's problematic or not. I think you need to revisit it because you're going to find that there's no perfection and there's going to be something that needs to be addressed. So generally speaking, I have no objection to that sort of thing. The knee-jerk piece, and I'm glad Ken made the comment that he made, but being knee-jerk because you pick out something anecdotally, and then you fuel that and expand that, and it drives the negativity that's associated with, let's just make change, it has to be rejected. What we have to do is have a very careful process of looking at things and making sure that we are clear on our objectives, who's being affected, and we want to make sure that we don't leave anybody out of that equation. We know that the system historically has not been perfect, and I don't expect it to be perfect, but I think we can do better in certain regards. I won't get into those specifics. I want to caution everyone, though, a comment I made earlier. We just don't know everything. We go up there and act like we know everything because if our constituents think we don't know everything, they won't put us back in. If our constituents think that we're not effective because someone picks out something anecdotally that is something that's long-term and you can't immediately change, then all of a sudden you're under attack again. So we have this tendency, and I say this to my colleagues all the time, we asked for it, so we're here. We don't have to just knee-jerk react to everything to please constituency who may not be informed or may have a narrow view of what we're trying to do. We have to go through a very careful process and evaluation, and I think that's always invited in any system. So I have no problems with that. But we also should be careful that we may not know everything. In fact, I know we don't know everything. We ought to be careful. I rely a lot on people who know, that understand, that have worked in the environment, that are people of goodwill, that dedicate their lives to that. So I'm not ready to throw JCPS out the window, even though I have my own issues with JCPS. I'm ready to embrace them, fund them adequately, make sure that they're supported and not demonized in the work. Do you realize that what people do, that teachers in the room will understand this? You know what? You're a teacher, you sacrificing day one. That's a passion. That's something that you're after. It's beyond money. But the fact of the matter is, when we get in this bag of demonizing because something happens, the bus doesn't arrive on time, everybody generalizes about it, and all of a sudden, JCPS is bad. No, JCPS, if you look at it, does tremendously good work and has done it historically. And yes, it has flaws, and they should be looked at. So I just want to throw that out there. We do not know everything, and I think everything should be looked at. But I think we ought to be careful about who we're affecting, what our objectives are, and we should not just demonize something and say it's bad that sets the stage for people to get behind some concept that maybe we do or do not embrace and come out with consequences that we do not expect to have and do not want.
Thank you, Senator. All right, Lawrence, lightning round. So, concise question, and we'll go around the horn and give concise responses.
Real quick before I ask the question, if you don't get your question asked, you know who your legislator is. Direct your question right to that person, and hopefully you'll get an answer. So if you don't get your question asked here, go straight to your lawmaker. The question I have is, there are a couple of like this. Any chance for any red flag or other gun legislation?
Representative Kulkarni, go.
Yes, I think so. I think red flag laws have been filed by members of my caucus over the past several years. I know the bill that has, from my understanding, gotten the most traction for this coming session is the Crisis Aversion and Rights Retention Bill, which we will be hearing on Friday in Judiciary Committee, and I look forward to that, I'm sure, very robust discussion. And one of the things that I think, it's not everything that maybe we want, but I think one of the things that we need to recognize when we're talking about gun rights and when we're talking about public safety is that the majority of gun-related deaths are suicides. Nationally, more than half, and in Kentucky, over 60%. And that happens in rural counties, that happens in urban counties, and so I think we need to recognize that this is a much more nuanced discussion. It has less to do with your Second Amendment rights, and because it doesn't take away any of your Second Amendment rights. I don't know if anybody in this room can just quote the Second Amendment to me. It's a very short amendment, but it starts out with a well-regulated militia, right, being necessary to a free or secure state, and then the right of the people to bear and keep arms shall not be infringed. I think courts have decided that is the case, and then only in recent years has the Supreme Court, starting in 2008, decided that there is this idea of individual liberty and individual ownership, expanding the definition of self-defense, etc. But again, all of that has nothing to do with what this particular piece of legislation is or what any other nuanced discussion about gun violence is, which is prevalent in our society. It's especially prevalent in Louisville. But I'm hoping that we can at least take this modest step forward and try to make sure that people who are in crisis do not have access to a firearm with all of the due process rights that they are entitled to.
Thank you. We'll move on to another topic. Ron, please.
There was a recent report that the legislature's own rules are being abused, a lack of transparency, excluding the public from timely comment and input. Seeking some feedback on that.
Representative Fleming. Representative Bauman.
Well, I was just going to say I'm not aware of the rules being abused. I'm sorry.
Yes, I think what you're referring to, there's several representatives that's issued a letter in terms of looking at rules and change. Any comments that are made from our members of the General Assembly will be taken seriously and looked at thoroughly to see if it makes sense and so forth. So anyway, and we all have our opinions and so forth, but we all try to work together to try to do what we can in terms of have the best process going forward.
Your opinion on nonpartisan elections for Louisville mayor and council, or even statewide?
Do it now.
Senator Neal?
Don't do it now. Look, the fact of the matter is that Jefferson County has always leaned Democratic. Let's just look at it. And this is part of the, I don't want to call it a scheme, but perspective, that this is part of the steps we have to take to have more influence by the other party in Jefferson County. I think that's part of that reasoning. I think we're doing just fine. We just got to keep on plugging at it. That's my position.
And I'll make a really
I thought
quick
one
response.
person was answering the question.
Lightning round.
Lightning round. Lightning round.
We'll save that one for later, Representative Fleming. All right, Ron, go ahead. Last question.
All right. When looking at the 2024 budget, what is the plan for Kentucky state government employees and raises? Are there any particular agencies that are being singled out for more or less in terms of raises?
All right, this is a toss-up, so anyone can take this one.
You're pointing at me. The answer to the question is we are looking at increasing some raises for several departments.
Could he be more specific? Oh.
Okay, all right, we are at time. Can you please join me in thanking our panel for being with us today?